Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Adam, and in today's video I'd like to talk all about Queen's studio albums on compact disc. I'm not talking about the live albums or the compilation albums or the Queen Plus albums, just the core 4 original members, their 15 studio albums on compact disc. For instance, did you know that there are 6 different versions of each album available to buy on compact disc? But depending on where you live in the world and when you first started buying Queen on CD, you might only be aware of maybe 1 or 2 and have no idea about the others. Now, each of these 6 different masters are very different from each other. Some are really good and some are really bad when you compare it to the original vinyl release. And like I said, this video is intended to be almost like a guide, maybe to make you aware of other versions available and where to go find them and how to identify them if there's a particular version you want to seek out. Because to be honest, buying CD from Queen on eBay is very pick and mix, hit and miss. Because there's 6 different versions and the album artwork is all the same, a lot of sellers unknowingly list incorrectly the information in the description box and use stock photos of just the album artwork to advertise the sale. And so what you buy might not necessarily be what you're expecting to receive, and more often than not, I've been sent the wrong CD out. So I'll help you identify what you need to look for if you're looking for a particular version. Now, like I said, Queen first started releasing albums in 1973, their very first album, Queen, and their final album was Made in Heaven in 1995. Now, before we get into the different versions and I'll show you all what I've got, I want to talk a little bit about Queen and their recording and their albums across the different formats over the years, because I think it's worth noting that in 1973, we didn't have CDs or cassette tapes. It was just vinyl record. And Queen's hardware for how they recorded an album was very basic compared to how they recorded in 1995. The first Queen album was recorded on a 16-track recorder in a pure analog state on a magnetic tape. So the recording, the mixing, and the mastering was all done through analog, and then it was then cut to vinyl, and that's how it was distributed worldwide. And so the album has a very particular sound because of the way it was recorded, how it was recorded in terms of equipment, and the way it was mastered to the format of vinyl. Then for the 70s, that's pretty much the way it was. So half of Queen's catalog sounds a certain way because the expectation was that it was going to end up on a vinyl record. Whereas moving into the 80s, and we come into digital technology with CDs and cassette tapes, although they're still analog, the recording hardware changed as well, having 32 tracks or 24 tracks available to them, still recording on magnetic tape, but having much better equipment. And so with new mixing and mastering techniques, especially when talking about CDs, the albums sound very different from when they first started recording. And then again, moving into the 90s, as the recording techniques and the mixing and mastering techniques improve again, the final album, Made in Heaven, sounds vastly different and probably, in terms of sonic fidelity, superior to their very first Queen album. Now, like I said, this has a direct result for how it's going to sound on a CD, because just briefly, the difference between CD and vinyl. Vinyl compared to CD is very restrictive in what it can do. You cannot put the same kind of sound on a vinyl that you can put on a CD. A CD has a greater dynamic range. It has a decibel range of 96 decibels, whereas a vinyl record only has about 50 or 60 decibel dynamic range. And a vinyl record cannot hold the low bass end that a CD can have. The deeper the bass on a vinyl record, the wider the grooves get, meaning less space for recording an album, but also it means that the needle might skip on playback because the grooves are so, wide. Also, it can also cause problems when cutting the vinyl. So vinyls tend to be mastered in a very restrictive, narrow sound field, as it were, or a range of frequencies. And so their albums would have a very specific sound on a vinyl record, whereas on a compact disc, yes, it's a digital translation of what it came from, the master tape, but it has a greater dynamic range, so it can actually capture more nuances and deeper bass than a vinyl record can. But a vinyl record trumps the CD because it's a pure analog live signal recording. It's not a translation into digital and then back out to analog like a CD is. When you listen to CDs, you're listening to a translation of the original, whereas you listen to a vinyl and you are listening to that original recording on the vinyl record. But like I said, we're talking about CDs, but I just think it's important to note the difference between, how a vinyl sounds and how a CD sounds, because all of Queen's albums were originally released on vinyl record all the way up until the 80s, until they started being released on CD and vinyl. But the CD and vinyl would have very different versions coming out going into the 90s, and so you would have a very different listening experience. And I do believe Queen do intend the listeners to be listening to the vinyl as their preferred way to take a Queen album. But for me, the way the early albums sound is a direct result of its intention to be on vinyl and the recording equipment used. So when listening to these remasters, some sound better sonically in their fidelity than others, purely because they are a sign of the time. And like I said, if you grew up maybe in America or Italy or a certain part of the world and you first started buying at a certain time, you would only have had access to one particular version, and it might not be the good version. There is one definitive version out of these 6 that is superior to the others, and there is one specific version of these 6 which is way inferior than even the vinyl record, and we're going to get into it all. So that's basically Queen. So we're only talking about the 15 studio albums. So Queen started releasing their albums on compact disc for the very first time in 1983. CDs had just come out in the States. They had launched a couple of years prior in Japan, and they were big in those areas, but in the European territories it hadn't really taken off just yet. And in 1983, Elektra Records issued The Game and News of the World to the North American audience on CD for the very first time. Now, why did they issue those 2 albums only? Well, those 2 albums were the highest charting albums in America. So I feel like the 1983 releases, which sadly I don't own, are kind of a test bed for what was to come. They are very hard to track down. If you were looking to get these, they will have the Elektra label on them and have a certain catalog number, but they tend to be like 200 quid when you go to look for them on eBay, and they don't come up that often. And I imagine with the early technology of mastering to CD, they probably just sound like the vinyl record. And well, a vinyl record isn't going to use the full range of a CD, so they're probably just going to sound okay and sound like the vinyl record. But I haven't heard them, I don't own them, and I probably never will just because of their price. But they are the first time Queen ever appeared on the compact disc format. Now, a year later, Queen brought out a new album in 1984 called The Works, and this was the very first time Queen would be releasing an album on vinyl record, cassette tape, and CD in North America and Japan only. In Europe, we only got the cassette tape and the vinyl record. And it was the very first time Queen had mastered the album, even on vinyl, digitally, and then cut it to vinyl. So it even states on the vinyl record, digitally mastered. And that's because it was mixed and mastered on a digital workstation. So the CD is effectively taking full advantage of that original recording, whereas the vinyl record has a very more narrow version of the album, but still sounds really good. Now, it was released, like I said, by in North America only, but it was distributed by Capitol Records. Queen had just changed their distribution label from Elektra to Capitol Records. So that first version on CD will say Capitol Records on it, and you can identify it very easily because the disc itself has a red label on it. And in Japan, it was exactly the same, except it was distributed through EMI and has that same red label on it. Again, I don't have this early first version 1984 on CD. For a very good reason. I will get it because on eBay, you can pick up the one from Japan for like 5 or 10 quid on eBay very frequently. Whereas the one from Capitol Records from America is very hard to come by. And when it does come up, it's about 50 or 60 quid. So it's like, it's a bit hard to track down, but I will go out and get that Japanese one eventually. But the reason I haven't rushed to get it is because in 1986, when Queen were issuing their new album, A Kind of Magic, they relaunched their entire catalog on compact disc. And for the works, they used that original stamper from 1984 to put it to CD. So I have got that one. So effectively, I have got the 1984 version. I just don't have the artwork for it. In 1986, Kevin Metcalf, who was working with Queen, mastering A Kind of Magic, again, digitally, DDD on CD, was tasked with the work of bringing Queen's entire catalogue up to that point to compact disc. In fact, Queen were the very first band to bring their catalogue to compact disc. And so through EMI, this was in Europe only, you couldn't get it out by Capitol Records in America, Queen released their full catalogue on compact disc. Now, these are very easy to identify. They basically have the EMI on the back here as a way to identify it. It also says original sound recordings 1973. That appears on every version, so you can't really go by that. But the EMI in the corner is what you can go by. But also the disc label itself says here digital mastering AAD, and that is another way to identify that it's the original 1986 version on CD, as well as the EMI label there. And another way you can identify it, if you can get the layout out, is on the inside is a basic rundown trying to replicate the vinyl record with the pictures from the vinyl, but also having the CD information on the back there. So this is the original 1986 CD for the first album, Queen. Now, the sound on this doesn't take full advantage of the compact disc format. It is a really nice listen and sounds exactly like the vinyl record, just on a CD. There is a little bit of noise you can hear in the recording because I imagine that was inherent on the master tape. And with the vinyl record, it's probably masked by the phono preamp amplification, which adds its own certain type of noise anyway, which a lot of people do like, giving it a warmth feel, but also masking that tape hiss found on the original recordings. There was no noise reduction used on these versions of Queen on CD. They basically are what you'll find on the vinyl record. And and they all pretty much follow the same front cover layout as the vinyl record, with the same kind of artwork on the disc with this black labeling, and on the disc they all say digital mastering AAD, because it was an analog digital recording to this disc. So they recorded it in an analog state using the equipment in 1974. It was mixed on an analog station when they first laid down the multi-tracks to create the new stereo 1/4-inch master, and then it was digitally mastered to this format, AAD. And again, the artwork for this version of the album follows the vinyl record with the black and white theme, having the white in the middle with the black either side. Very short, no lyrics, same for the first album. And then the CD information of, you know, what AAD, ADD, and what DDD means. These are pretty easy to find. Some of the original 1986 albums on eBay are harder to find than others. I don't have them all just yet. I'm only missing like one or two. But, and this one, sadly, I lost the case to it. And basically, I gave the CD to my mom, backed up the original on the computer, but kept this inlay. So this is the original 1986 version. I just don't have the case or the CD, but I do have the very delicate notes, which did contain the lyrics to each song and has a very sort of definitive look to it. But again, on the very back, like all the others, has that AAD information. So for the sake of, you know, not having the original just yet, I have it backed up on the computer. I just burned that copy to a blank disc so I could still listen to the album. I will obviously replace this with an actual one. I always back up all my music onto the computer. Night at the Opera looks like this, again with the disc artwork, with the two black lines, AAD mastering. The back of every album is pretty much the same. Has the AAD in the corner with the EMI logo at the bottom, and the artwork on the inside again just copies the album really, with the pictures that you got on the vinyl record. The lyrics are contained in this one, and the back one information has that information there. So all of the albums from Queen all the way up to A Kind of Magic you can get from 1986, that first original release on compact disc. I pretty much have them all. I'll just quickly go through and show the front cover and the disc artwork, because they all pretty much are the same except for one. Now, Kevin Metcalf, like I said, did the mastering of these albums. He didn't do every single one. I believe Mac and Peter Mew might have done a couple, but he was tasked with the job of bringing all of them to CD. And that's what the back of News of the World looks like, which is important to note to be able to recognize and differentiate that from another one. There are some errors on the back of these covers where a lot of these tracks say 3.1 time. They don't have the 0, or they're not even 3.1 in length. There's a bit of an error, I guess, with the printing, but for the most part, I mean, you know, disc labels, okay, I guess. You know, nothing to shout about. You do get the picture artwork, although you don't get the naked ladies on the bike inside this one. You do get a cut down version of the inner, you know, picture spread over many different pages. Very strange. But yeah, The sound on all of these albums is really good. You can actually crank them up quite loud and you will not get distortion. The only problem with that is the louder they go, the more noise you'll hear from the noise floor. And tape hiss will come into it, but they sound very good. They sound very dynamic. You hear exactly what you hear on the vinyl record, and I feel that that is really important because on the vinyl record, every Queen album has a certain sound internally. It's like this inner atmosphere, and it's the space between the instruments and the vocals. There is this airiness to it. And especially on the first 3 Queen albums, you really do hear and feel this airy sound. And it sounds really good. And it does appear on these CDs as well. It hasn't been crushed out. That's the Flash Gordon one. You know, it does retain the vinyl sound. So if you do... You know, if you don't have a vinyl player and you want to hear Queen's original sound, these CDs are the ones to get. Now, this is the different one because the catalog number for this album is exactly the same. It's identical to that 1984 release. They just restamped the information that was on the disc, which was done by George Marino in America, to this new release. So Kevin Metcalf didn't do this one. It was just a reissue of what came out in 1984. So effectively I have that 1984 version. Only the fact is that the disc label was red to match the album vinyl inner spindle bit, whereas this one is, you know, falls in line with the 1986 release. But these are really nice to own. Like, I would highly recommend seeking these versions out because they sound really good, but more importantly, they sound authentic. And of course, the A Kind of Magic album was a original initial release. So this is the first and only, I guess, kind of release from 1986 of this album, because this is the one that came out on CD. Now, there is a massive difference between this and the vinyl record in the way that you got 3 extra tracks on the back there. Because a CD can hold 90 minutes of audio, whereas a vinyl record is restricted to the width of the grooves. So the more bass you're putting on, the wider the grooves get and the less space you have on the album. And so usually it's about a 45-minute, 60-minute job on a vinyl record. And so a lot of Queen albums up to this point are between 30 and 45 minutes in length. Very rarely ever hitting 45 minutes. Whereas this CD goes on a little bit longer because it contains 3 extended kind of mixes of A Kind of Magic, Friends Will Be Friends, and that Forever piano medley that Brian wrote for Highlander. And so this is like a different flavor of Queen, you know, that's set against that vinyl release. Now, it didn't end there, obviously, for Queen. They went on to release 3 more albums. Now, everything changed after the A Kind of Magic album. When it came time to release the Miracle album, in America, again, Capitol Records handled that distribution. So you'll know that you have the American version if on the back it says Capitol Records. But in England and for the rest of Europe, Parlophone took over the distribution for Queen's catalogue, and so you will find Parlophone on the back there if you have the European version, no matter where it was pressed or stamped, which it will say. And this one it says made in the UK. So this is the original 1989 release on CD. Again, slightly different from the vinyl record. Released in 1989 by Parlophone, again different from the vinyl record, it actually comes with 3 extra tracks. You've got Hang On In There, which was a B-side to one of the singles. You've got the 12-inch mix of The Invisible Man and Chinese Torture, which again is a little instrumental medley from Queen, which really isn't anything, I think. But yeah, really sounds okay. Very similar to the vinyl record I found, except for the length. And, you know, there were album versions of songs like On a Kind of Magic and The Works, where the single version was actually slightly different. But yeah, nice album. Then in 1991, Queen's final album with Freddie Mercury. In America, the distribution label changed. Disney got the rights and never let it go for the distribution of Queen's catalog in America, and gave it to Hollywood Records to release. So if it says Hollywood Records 1991, you most likely have that original, you know, release. In the European states, again, it was Parlophone, and the Innuendo album was something quite special on CD because it is the full uncut version of Queen's Innuendo album. Everybody who got the vinyl record got a cut down version. The length of the album was just too long to fit on a vinyl record, and so some of the songs got edited down for vinyl, whereas on the CD they appear uncut. So there is no extra songs on this. It's just within the songs you have the full track, whereas on the vinyl they were cut down. Now again, I had got this originally back in 1991. This is the original version, which I backed up on the PC, but sadly gave the discs away, and with the original artwork, with the original case, kept the artwork though, and so I just had to burn a copy to be able to listen to it for this video. And again, it sounds okay. It does sound very restrictive, I'd say. This was sadly due to Freddie's health, a almost rush job where it's very underproduced, much like the News of the World album. And so it sounds like it could have been better had they given it more time, but I feel like they were trying to get this out very quickly in Freddie's lifetime because of his failing health, sadly. It did obviously get released. I think it was September, October 1991. The year pretty much Freddie passed away. And Queen were no more, or so we thought. Of course, in 1995, Queen brought out a brand new Queen album. Now, this isn't the original case. This is what I got sent off eBay. The original case will have all these cues going down the side here, but this is the original release from 1995, and it was mainly brought out on CD. Again, the vinyl record version having a very much cut down version of it. There is a track on here, the final track, which isn't actually listed on the back there, but it's just called Yeah, and it basically is a 22-minute instrumental piece which does not appear on the vinyl record. This album sonically sounds way better than any other previous version of Queen's albums, mainly because it was most of it came from magnetic tapes stemming from the 80s or the late 80s, but the other stuff, when they actually recorded, was all recorded to digitally, a workstation. It was mixed and mastered digitally, as well as most of it recorded digitally. And so the bass on this sounds really nice. It has a great dynamic range, sounds crystal clear. They obviously, you know, mixed the earlier from, you know, the 80s stuff to make it sound like the rest of the album. And, you know, for what they had and what they did, I think it is a nice album. But sound-wise, it's probably one of their best sounding albums, because the CD format in the mid-90s, you know, the way you create a CD and the way you record a CD had changed from 1986 and gotten way better. And so the sound on this is really nice, and the sound on the vinyl is very different. Now, before that came out, going back now to, like, that's the original hardcore release version of the CDs. But going back to 1991, when the Innuendo album had come out, Hollywood Records, it was Queen's 20th anniversary as well. And to help celebrate that, Hollywood Records reissued Queen's entire back catalogue on CD, most likely because, well, they hadn't actually appeared yet in North America. Only people from EMI in European was able to buy Queen on CD. So Queen or Hollywood Records issued what's known as the Hollywood Records remasters. I only currently have 2. I will get more. These are very mixed bag. It's hit and miss. There is 1 or 2 which sound good because they weren't done by Eddie Schreier, who did the majority of these remasters. But I think because the CD format can hold more, they were inclined to put more on the album for the CD release beyond what originally was released, because nearly all of the Hollywood remaster releases, which only go from Queen up until The Miracle, don't include Innuendo because that was released initially first, have extra tracks on them. Now, obviously, A Kind of Magic and The Miracle had extra tracks in Europe anyway. They kind of get released like that for the Hollywood Records versions, but all the other albums that didn't have extra tracks are given extra tracks. Sometimes it's a B-side, but most of the time it's this remix, which using local, at the time, DJs got a chance to remix some songs. We had Tie Your Mother Down by Matt Wallace. We had Somebody to Love by Randy Badaz. I don't know, honestly, some of these are really poor. Seven Seas Awry remixed by Freddie Bastone. Ogre Battle remixed by Nicholas Sonano. And I think We Will Rock You by Rick Rubin. These, like, first off, these versions, like, I do actually quite like the cover of that one. It is quite nice and very faithful to the album, more so than the EMI 1986 release. The artwork almost kind of looks like a bootleg, to be honest. It's not exactly inspiring, I'd say. And the inner artwork is very different to the 1986 release. It's actually a fold-out kind of almost poster with a black and white side. You have the lyrics of the songs here with the band painted kind of on there. And then on the back you have obviously the album cover, the back of the album cover, and then you have the inlay with the production notes and the song titles. And that is it. The paper is very rigid, very almost thick, but thin at the same time. The sound quality is not very good compared to the 1986 EMI version. There is an increase in volume for the first time on a Queen album. They raised the level of this album. No noise reduction was used, so you can hear a little tape hiss, but it does sound a lot louder. And in the high end, in the cymbal clashes, it begins to distort the louder you play it. They're not really that good, I would say, in my personal opinion. But if this is all you grew up with, you would think that's the way the Queen album should sound. But it definitely is not. You'll know if you've got this because it will say Hollywood Records in the bottom corner there. If you know you've got the remaster, the re-release from 1991. I've only got, say, 2. I've got the Queen 2 and A Day at the Races, 2 of my favourite albums from Queen. The cover art on Day at the Races is a little bit nicer than I would say Queen 2. Again, the artwork on the inner side, which celebrates Queen's 20th anniversary there, is like a fold-out poster, but this time it goes lengthways, faithfully reproducing the artwork from the vinyl record, but also includes all the single pictures, which I think is pretty cool. As well as, you know, a couple of shots at the back there. Again, the sound quality on this, distorted at high volume levels in the high ends. Added a couple of, you know, bullshit tracks. Not my favorite way to listen to either of those albums or any of the Hollywood record versions. I literally will be getting them just to complete a collection, not to listen to. I really don't like the Hollywood records re-releases from '91. I don't think they represent the album faithfully. I think Eddie Schreier did a job as well as he could, but the volume was raised on pretty much all the albums. Now, the only one he didn't do, I know for a fact, is the Works album, which I believe was a restamp from the 1984 Capitol Records version. I could be wrong on that. And Eddie Schreier, I believe, did an album. I think it actually might have been Day at the Races, actually. He did one of the albums for Hollywood Records. But yeah, Hollywood Records, I'd say one to avoid. So, something now, this is something that's interesting in the history of Queen. So we're in 1991. Obviously, you know, they've re-released the albums. You know, Made in Heaven is yet to release, but the deals are changing, you know. Hollywood Records own distribution rights for America and re-released the catalog. Money for Disney. In England, Parlophone own the catalog, and they haven't released or re-released, you know, the albums in Europe. The only CDs in Europe from 1991 that you can buy are those original EMI releases, which EMI are still getting the money for them. And for the first 8 albums, from Queen up to The Game, Trident are still making money because of the deal they had with Queen back in the 70s when they took them on and signed them up with a record contract. Queen found out, well, this isn't actually a good deal and wanted to get out of it. And so Jim Beach stepped in to get him out of it by saying, okay, Trident, you'll get royalties from Queen's first so many albums going up to The Game. And then after that, you get nothing. It's all for Queen. And Trident were like, okay, they paid him like $100,000 on top of that, but also 1% of every album sale moving forward. Now, this was under the EMI label. So as soon as it moved to Parlophone, it kind of ended that contract because Trident would only get money from the EMI releases. And up until 1991, well, that's all you could buy. And I think the next set of releases from Parlophone were basically them saying, we're now getting the money for this back catalogue, and Trident, you ain't getting a penny. And I think that triggered Trident, and I'll show you why. So in 1993 and 1994, again, Kevin Metcalf, this time at Abbey Road Studios, was given the opportunity to bring Queen's back catalogue and reissue them for the European territories. And it was called the Digital Master Series. Now, you can easily identify the Digital Master Series because it has, and I'll use the Greatest Hits as an example here, a massive gold label saying Digital Master Series. The Greatest Hits album and the Live Killers album were included in this set, but we're not going to talk about that. For the first album, again, it's a repress from my PC, so I'll quickly skip past that one. But the artwork for the first time does actually contain the lyrics. For Queen 2, it looks like that. Again, the art print on this I don't think is as nice as the Hollywood Records version, which has a much softer look to it and more appropriate to the background, whereas this one, which actually is more faithful to the vinyl record, I don't think looks as nice. I think the Hollywood Records trumps in terms of artwork. But again, these actually fall back to the labeling almost on some of them, although not for Queen 2, from the 1986 versions. And I'll show you why in a bit. Now, the major difference between these and the way to spot these in the wild is on the back. You can easily see there, it says Digital Master Series. Just here. On every version of the albums that we have here, it says Digital Master Series, and it says 1994 or 1993. Now, the artwork inside, again, basically reproduces the 1986 version because Kevin Metcalf did the mastering on these. You get the album lyrics for all of the albums now, and you get all the artwork that appeared on that 1986 version. And on the back page, you get the catalogue from the Digital Master Series. And as you can see, it only goes up to the Works album, which I think is very interesting. Obviously, it doesn't include kind of Magic because that already had a digital master on CD. It didn't need it, nor did The Miracle, Innuendo. And obviously, Made in Heaven hadn't been released just yet. These started coming out 2 years before Made in Heaven did. I believe this was basically a way to help promote the build-up to Made in Heaven, but also to steal the sales from EMI. So these were issued by Parlophone 1993 to 1994. Now, the reason these were issued, I believe, are for two reasons. For one, it's a kind of way to build up to the Made in Heaven album that would be coming out in 1995, and the advertisements would have started in 94 off the back of the release of this Digital Master Series. They were all done by Kevin Metcalf, who was the in-house masterer for Queen, who worked with all four band members on the original 1986 album, 1989 album, the Innuendo album, and would go on to work on the Made in Heaven, but who also worked on these at Abbey Road. It's interesting because for the first four albums, or the first three albums, Queen were under a contract with Trident. And on the original albums, even on CD, Trident appears, you know, in the actual artwork, you know, in the inlay. You know, Trident Studios and all that, even on the original vinyl. But for the Digital Master Series, Trident does not appear anywhere on here. They vanish from the artwork. Why? Well, like I said, Queen weren't happy with Trident after making this album, and they wanted to get out of the contract. And the contract was, well, you know, you're stuck in. And if you want out, then you'll give us X amount of money and the royalties on your next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 albums, going up to and including the game. And so they said, okay, fine, you'll get 1% of all the album sales under EMI for the next, you know, up until the game. And obviously the Works album, which they went to America to initially record, was brought out by Capitol Records in America and EMI over here. But when this Digital Master Series came out through Parlophone, this was a brand new contract. Didn't involve EMI. Trident didn't get a penny. In fact, Trident are missing from all the artwork. So this is kind of a giant fuck you to Trident Studios. This is basically Queen replacing those 1986 versions with new versions. And so everyone going out to buy these, or at least discard them. And so all the money goes to Parlophone, who are the new distributors. And so they kind of do follow that original 1986, you know, to make it go, well, it's very, you know, similar. You could mistake this for the 1986 version because they're pretty much identical on the inside. The only difference being they have the catalog for the Digital Master Series, and they say the Digital Master Series on them from 1994 or 1993, depending on, you know, when it came out. They came out in two batches, a 1993 and 1994. The sound on these is okay. Like, like the Hollywood records, they have got a couple of decibels volume increase, but not as bad as the Hollywood records, and they don't feature distortion. There is noise reduction used, though, and this completely destroys, although it's a very minor noise reduction, but it destroys that inner sound atmosphere of the Queen album. They are good to listen to. They are better than the Hollywood records, but they aren't as good as the original 1986 release. These are, you know, if this is all you can get, then you'll be happy with it, and you don't need to rush out and find the 1986 releases. But, you know, I still do prefer the 1986 releases because they have that authentic sound of the album, whereas these digital remasters sound just cleaner, free of that noise, you know, which should be there because it's part of that inner album. And removing it, oh, it looks like this one is a reprint as well. But yeah, I just reprinted that one. I will go through and get the ones that I've reprinted, but yeah. They sound cleaner, though. They sound a little bit, not beefier or bassier, but they just sound slightly less, you know, hissy, effectively. And they come with weird artwork, like some, I don't know what this is, the red thing, and putting the massive barcode in the corner, you know. But yeah, the sound, and there is no extra tracks. You don't get, you know, remixes and all sorts of bullshit on these albums. You just get the actual album. So you want the album, you get it. You know, you don't have to put up with all sorts of, you know, that's another reprint. You don't have to put up with like remixes on these versions. Now, obviously, they're fine. You know, they're okay. They're easy to get as well. You can get them for like less than $5 on eBay. Very plentiful, but you just gotta be careful because, you know, make sure it says digital remaster, make sure it's a Parlophone release, and make sure it says 1994, yada yada yada. Hot Space, another reprint. Gotta get that one again. And then finally, The Works, which wasn't a reprint from 1984. This one was worked on by Kevin Metcalf, not George Marino. It doesn't contain the information about George Marino in here anymore, but is basically identical. And it doesn't. They don't have, even though the artwork of the disc looks the same, they don't contain the digital mastering AAD anymore because it's now an ADD. By taking the original master tapes, they worked it on a digital console and then mastered, like, put it all together and then mastered it. So these, if anything, are ADD rather than an AAD. But that is the Digital Master Series. A nice way to listen to it, but not my preferred way. Now, that was 1994 when that all wrapped up, and that must have really pissed off Trident Studios, because they're basically going, we're not making money now off those first however many Queen albums, because now it's under Parlophone. And I think this triggered Trident, because in 1998 there was a release in America only where, you know, they didn't really have the distribution rights. Hollywood Records did, and so Hollywood Records released this, but it was all put together by Peter Mew at Abbey Road Studios, and it only contains the albums up until The Game. Peter Mew, for anybody who doesn't know, is the managing director at Trident Studios. In 1998, Queen released in North America only, by mail order only, the Queen Crown Jewel set. This is a lovely box set, presented in a very nice way, of Queen's first albums up until The Game, with a lovely booklet as well, describing not only how everything happened in terms of these albums, but contains the full album lyrics to each album, which has its artwork printed, as well as extra artwork from the album as well. And it is kind of like a big, thick book. And they're color-coded. I don't know if you can pick that up. But they're color-coded. So you can easily get to the one that you want, you know, to get to. And it does say in here that they were mastered, or rather the original master tapes were recorded in 24-bit to a station where Peter Mew then worked on them. And, you know, this is 1998. Crown jewels, mate. And you only give me the first, what, 2, 4, 6, 8 albums. Why? Because this is a Trident release, really. And it came out in America only under Hollywood Records, because Hollywood Records were distributors in America. But this was put together by Peter Mew, managing director of Trident. This is basically Trident's, you know, way to get back a bit of money for those first 8 albums that they have contracts with. Now, in the book for this states that it was put together by Queen as well. And I have a feeling what happened when the Digital Master Series came out is that Trident kicked off. And I reckon was possibly even thinking about suing, because the Parlophone reissues of the Digital Master Series completely just replaced in the shops EMI's original 1986 versions, meaning Trident don't get any money. And so I think Queen, you know, got together with Peter Mew and said, okay, we'll allow you access to those 8 album master tracks. You put out your own version of the Digital Master Series, and we'll say nothing more of it. You know, and it was released in America. You had to mail order this. This I picked up for like 50 quid off eBay. It goes for between 50 to 150. I think I got a bargain because this is in mint condition. Whereas a lot of them have scuffs or broken bits. But I gotta tell you, this is a total money grab, okay? This is not an essential purchase. Yes, recorded at 24 bits, dithered to 16-bit using the latest technology. They sound really good. But the album artwork is shockingly bad. It's very cheap cardboard. It's matted, it's not glossed like a vinyl record would be. They all come in these little, you know, which is really nice to keep the CD from scratching, these little plastic inner bits, but there's no production notes. All of that is in the book. So the picture on the back of all the album is very cheaply printed. The disc, though, is quite nice, and these are the same masters that appear in the Ultimate Collection, which I believe came out in 1995. So I imagine Peter Mew worked on these before 1998. Obviously, probably 1995, after the Made in Heaven album, right after the release of the Digital Master Series, because these prints are what you'll get in the Ultimate Collection. Obviously, you'll get all the albums in the Ultimate Collection, which was released only through the fan club, and I believe in Europe only. Probably that was Queen's way of silently trying to get back sales from this set that only released in North America. I mean, look at the state of that. That is shockingly poor, you know, artwork reproduction. It's very thick card. It feels cheap in your hands, is what it feels like. The artwork, though, for the discs, I do prefer over the Digital Master Series, but come on, look at that. That looks like a bloody pirate copy version. Like, it's presentation is all on the outside, this lovely velvet box, you know. The sound on these things is really good. Every album, sounds very weighty and very crystal clear. You know, 24-bit recordings. It's a really nice set to listen to. Better than the Digital Master Series, but again, noise reduction used. The internal album sound is gone, you know. They do reproduce the vinyl record, though, faithfully, you know. and it's a Hollywood Records release. This is a total cash grab by Trident Studios to, you know, okay, let's have one final blast at Queen's albums, you know, before we, you know, go silently into the night. Yeah, it's very, it feels so skanky in your hands, but at least, like, and the artwork is okay on the disc, but the sound is way better than the presentation, you know. I mean, what the hell is that thing? There's a green box going around that one. Like, hello. At least they got the inside right. And again, the back has got this box on it. I don't understand what they were doing. Peter Mew must have been smoking something. You know. Now, don't fret if you don't have this set, okay? Because there's another release coming. This is the 4th version. We're on the 3rd version. No. 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th version. 5, 6. Yeah, this is the 4th iteration of Queen's music. But don't fret if you don't have this in your collection, because the first 8 albums of this, which, by the way, I gotta say, they actually did do something right with the jazz album. You get the full artwork, not cut up, but also you get the titty poster. In here is a reprint of the naked girls on the bikes. So, which they did correctly, I feel. But yeah, don't fret if you don't have this album on CD or this collection. You're not missing anything, because in 1998, as this was launching in America, also in Japan was releasing a set which had these albums, these transfers on that set, and again faithfully reproduced, although with the wrong album artwork for the game, faithfully reproduced, you know, the vinyl set, and they are the vinyl mini LP versions. But the first 8 albums are these transfers. And that's basically it. Case closed. Yeah, so 1998 in Japan, those albums came out on a mini LP and basically looked exactly like this. This is the game's version from 1998. And it basically replicates what exactly appeared on the vinyl record. You only get a piece of paper, though, as that bit, and you get your Japanese lyrics and all that on this sheet, which says 1998 on it, so you know it's from 1998. And then in 2001, Peter Mew must have then actually worked on all of these albums, because oops-a-daisy, all of Queen's albums in 2001 got issued on this Japanese label set for the entire 15 albums. I'm not going to open up every single one. We're going to open up a couple, because they're really fiddly to get out of the plastic. They have the original Obi on them, and they look like that. Now, these are actually really good. Like I said, the first 8 are the same ones as the USB, as the Crown Jewel set. Also in 1998, they also released Queen's albums on a USB stick, which I will say something about the jazz album. Now, for these, the original inner label is reproduced from the vinyl record, EMI. But Peter Mew did the mastering on this. It's the one from Abbey Road. It's the one from the Crown Jewel set. So if you've got these, you've got that, basically. It's the same transfer. So yeah, they do sound great, but again, they've been amplified. They have loudness applied. They have noise reduction applied, and they are a little bit distorted sometimes. They aren't, for me, the best way. They do sound great. They do sound great. Very clear, very weighty, you know. They were all done at 24 bits, just like the Crown Jewel set was. But, like every Queen album, there are flaws, which I didn't actually mention for the Digital Master Series. So some of the albums, the way the CD tracks have been inserted, are not faithful to the songs. There's a lot of songs on the first 3 Queen albums, or on the second and third Queen album, sorry, and the fourth, which kind of like segue into each other. And on the CD for the Digital Master Series, the point at which it changes track isn't an exact science for the song, and so you do tend to find that some songs run into each other. If you skip to a certain song, you'll hear a little bit of the previous song first before it segues in, and just the way that they chose to, you know, cut the tracks up on the Digital Master Series was a bit rubbish, and that's all corrected on this set. But what isn't corrected on this set is the same issue that has plagued this poor album ever since its release. And that is basically, looks like it's sealed. On the track Jealousy, for whatever reason, and I gotta tell you, it does make a difference, Roger's drum kit was missing its bass kick. Like on the song Jealousy, they just kind of forgot to put it in for the vinyl record release. And it appears exactly like that for the 1986 CD release. So basically it was missing from the master tape. Meaning the Digital Master Series had that same issue. The Hollywood Records version had that same issue because everyone's using the master tapes. The USB set has that same... USB set. The Crown Jewel set has that same issue, as does this Japanese version, which also includes the titty poster. Has that same issue. Now, many of you will say, that was rectified for the most recent releases. That drum beat was reinserted into the song Jealousy for this album, and it does sound completely different with it in. But yeah, the world wouldn't know that until 2011. So yeah, all of these are the 2001. Now these also got reissued in 2004. Just literally a restamp of the same, you know, version here, which was basically done between 1995 and 1998 originally, but they do contain all of the albums, and they contain Live at Wembley, Live Killers, and I believe Greatest Hits 1, but not 2. There is no, well, sometimes inside, I think this is a 98 release actually. No, it's not, it's 2001. This one's from 2004, as it states in the corner. But some of them inside in their Japanese artwork, they do have a list of the other albums that are in that set. But yeah, they're like a nice little keepsake thing. But again, I don't think that these are the best versions. They don't have distortion, but they do have noise reduction, and they have been boosted, and they've been boosted a lot more than the Digital Master Series. So for me, yeah, these sound clearer, but they sound louder, and that inner Queen dynamic sound is completely destroyed. But they're not the worst ones. Like, these are the favorites of many people's. For me, the worst one is the 2011 anniversary versions, which Queen issued or reissued in 2011. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. I want to do an honorary mention. Parlophone, back in 2005, was doing a kind of like after they re-released these ones, Parlophone was doing a last chance ditch effort to get some money, and so decided to actually release a decent set. Now, this isn't the albums, this is an honorary mention. It's the singles collection, and 13 singles contained within this set, again faithfully reproducing the single artwork just like the Japanese set, although for the disc artwork they kind of dropped the ball because they just gave them all the same bloody artwork, which was that for this set, purple, in the purple theme. And it is, yeah, these are good. Now, these were all done by Peter Mew at Abbey Road, but they were released by Parlophone. Very interesting. And very nice set, I will say. Each set, like I said, 13 singles with the B-sides, but they aren't the original versions. Like, yes, they are the original mixes that came out, you know, but these are the digital versions. These aren't like an analog version pressed to CD. These have been digitally mastered, you know, from that original release. So all the single versions, like the edits, are on here, yes, but it's been digitally translated. So it's a shame that it wasn't a pure analog version from, you know, the original single. That would have been way better. But all four sets cover Queen's entire career, and do not end with the final one, because obviously Queen still released music after this set came out, which I believe was 2009, with Face It Alone, Queen's most recent single release, and they released a version to go in this set, reproducing the vinyl single version. And so that actually just sits nice and neatly in this set, a part of the collection. And that was the honorary mention of why I wanted to mention it, is because Parlophone released these between 2008 and 2010, I believe, right before they sold the catalogue to Universal Pictures, or Universal International Music. And Island Records now owned the rights of distribution. And in 2005, well, probably 2008 actually, after Peter Mew had done all these singles, Bob Ludwig had gone through and done all the albums and remastered them up in Oregon, in America. Which means when Americans get hold of Queen's catalogue, just like the Hollywood record versions, all bets are off. These are the worst sounding CD versions, and many people will, you know, debate that, will say no, these actually sound really good. The reason you'll think that is because the volume has been cranked up almost 10 decibels and completely crushing the dynamics on each and every album. You can hear every sound at the same level. You know, there is no difference between the quietest moments and the loudest moments now. Everything is at the same level. These have been normalized and crushed to death. Compression used, like, these are the worst way to listen to these albums, in my opinion anyway. The artwork, though, is actually really good. The presentation is really nice. Look at the artwork on Queen 2. That is basically going back to Mick Rock's original photograph and rescanning and taking the picture, like, you know, as in printing it, and has the most clean looking version ever. Now, for me, when I got this set, which was an entire, all the 15 albums, at the same time, they were also issuing all of Queen's albums on SACD. And so I was like, yeah, because I was into SACD. And SACD effectively is the album on a 24-bit 96 kilohertz DVD. basically, this is the original master that Peter Mew was working from when he dithered him down to CD. Obviously, these have been mixed or mastered by Bob Ludwig, and they are part of that anniversary 40th 2011 remaster set. So, but these actually sound really good, and some of the albums actually are my preferred way to listen, but only on some of the albums, because most of them, again, compression used, all the dynamics have been completely killed. That inner sound is gone from every single album. But some of them actually you can really catch the inner sound of the choral effects, the background vocals, you can really feel and hear that spatial separation between instruments. But unfortunately, that sound that's within that difference is gone again. And they were all 2 CD sets. So basically, when I, got these SACDs, I gave the original CD versions from this set to my kids. Backed them up on the computer, and that's basically where I put my SACD. I had it here because these are 2 disc sets. All of these contain a bonus CD with extra tracks, basically advertising Queen. Hey, here's some live tracks. Here's some tracks from a forthcoming box set. Here's some songs from this upcoming set. And that bonus EP was basically Queen whoring out their other stuff. So I gave the CDs to my kids, but obviously backed it up on the PC. So reintroducing the original, version in on a backed up disc. Eventually I will go out and buy the single disc versions just to place the disc in here. But yeah, not my favorite way to listen to Queen at all. But all of the albums faithfully reproduce, I would say, the artwork for the album. In fact, Brian May, for the first Queen album, went back for a more recent release, a reissue, reimagine of this album, to redo this front cover. So it's a little bit sharper. But the artwork for, which again is a bugger to get out. You basically have to bend the booklet to get it out. Faithfully reproduces the album artwork from the vinyl as much as you can on a smaller format. But you also get the full album lyrics, and there is also you also get other pictures, sorry. But there's also at the back of the booklet, if I can get there, production notes by Greg Brooks and Gary Taylor for those extra songs. So, yeah, it's a nice set visually. And you get super jewel cases, I love super jewel cases. But unfortunately, the sound on these is diabolical. Definitely would not recommend getting these. But these versions are what represent Queen on Spotify, Amazon Music, iTunes, and even on their official YouTube channel. These are basically now the latest definitive versions, sadly. And these versions were reissued in 2019 in an Italian book style. And so exclusive to Italy in 2019, they got these versions. Other areas of the world also got exclusive versions, like Portugal and Spain got a Kevin Metcalf digital master version on a CD book version where it's a book containing all the lyrics and pictures and the CD album. Obviously, there have been other issues of these 2011 sets with collector's editions. This contains the CD, just like that other set does for The Miracle. And this one for News of the World. And even smaller releases got that same, you know, 2011, although this one is different. This one is worth getting because it's not the same as the box set. So with this box set, it comes with the CD and it comes with the vinyl record. And you have to open it up to see what's inside. It doesn't have anything on the back, sadly. But for the LP version, they actually reinserted Too Much Love Will Kill You on the LP, but not for the CD. The CD is still that original album version, as it were, but it's the 2011 version. So this vinyl record has a different edition of the Miracle album, which is a bit weird that the CD doesn't, sadly. And it's the same for this one. This one doesn't have Too Much Love Will Kill You, you know, and it's issued by EMI under Universal Records, or under Island Records, Universal Music. So a bit of a weird release, this one, because it's not what the vinyl is in that collector's set, and yet it's still the 2011 remaster. So I don't know. Anyway, that's basically everything. You know, there are 6 versions to choose from, and for my personal preference, the original 1986 CD release is the best because it faithfully reproduces the vinyl much better. But if you like a cleaner sound, the Digital Master Series is my second best version, and after that I'd probably go with the Japanese ones, with Hollywood Records and the Universal Island Records versions being at the bottom of that list. Now, I did miss out a set which I will never own, and that is the Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab versions. They only did 3 or 4 albums. I have heard them. They are very good. Yeah. There's a bit of controversy about those because they say that they are actually a AAA, you know, line into the CD, but they're not. They all come from a digital version. So yeah. And obviously on the jazz album for the Island Record ones, the Jealousy track was corrected, and you'll hear the bass kick on this album, but it wasn't the first time it was done for this. It was done actually first on that USB set first, before it was done for the 2011 version. That USB set, you can't buy it anymore, but I do have a copy backed up on the PC from it. I just don't have it physically here. Now, if you want to go on eBay and buy some of these, you know, maybe you're looking for the Digital Master Series, or you have to be careful because these 2011 versions you can easily spot because they all say 40th anniversary there in the corner, and they all will say 2011 Universal or Island Records on the CD itself, or the catalog number will be from that Universal, you know, Island Record one. The real difference is between the Digital Master Series and the original 1986 versions, because the discs artwork is pretty much all the same. Oh, I forgot to show you. Good thing about this little Japanese set here is that they actually did faithfully recreate the vinyl, or at least recreate the original CD release, because for the Japanese release on CD, you actually get the original red printed disc. So this is what's kind of, you know, prevented me from going to get, you know, that album, because, you know, well, I've got the album artwork here and I've got the sound of the album on the other disc, so I literally would just be getting it for the sake of the artwork, which is why I'm not rushed yet to get it. But I will get it. It will come on the way, and everything will be yay. But yeah, I just wanted to shout that out. But yeah, the Digital Master Series, the 1986 ones, you've really got to check. On the back, it will say Digital Master Series 1994, whereas on the back of the EMI original 1986 ones, it will just have the EMI logo, and it won't say, it'll just have the date the album was made. So really check, and the catalog numbers are different. And the catalog numbers, you can actually, if you type in Queen Vaults on Google and go to releases on that website, for each album, it does tell you all the catalog numbers for each version release. So you can easily identify on eBay for those that have put the catalog numbers in. But just be careful, because the catalog number for the 1986 release of the works is the same as the one from 1984. They just re-stamped it and reissued it fully. But that's basically it. Like, I hope this video has been of some use to you. Queen are my favorite band, as you can see, and I love hearing the differences between the different remasters. So if there is something you're interested in looking for, you now can go and find it out in the wild. And I do implore you to listen to the differences between these versions, because I think you'll be quite surprised. There is a massive difference between listening to a Queen album with your headphones on, be it earbuds or full-on headset, and listening to it through full speakers. The 2011 versions are really kind of meant to listen to on your phone through earbuds, I feel. Whereas the 1986 versions, you want to have blasting through your speakers, because there's a massive difference. And I think that's why they actually did these 2011 versions, is for the new age audience, you know, who are used to listening to compressed music off iTunes or Spotify, who are used to blasting it in their eardrums. And when you're wearing headphones, the quietest sound, the loudest sound kind of do have the same, because it's right in your ear. You're not separated from the speaker, you know, and so you don't get that distance, and so it's all different. Anyway, go listen to it on speakers, and I'll catch you later. Take care. Bye-bye.